Hi, I'm Audra. I'm. I don't even like to say my name. I'm Audra. Audra means strong and noble. I don't feel strong. I don't feel noble. But I'm doing this because I've had a lot of pressure from, God. That sounds stupid. So, people say, God spoke to me. I don't see it like that. I don't hear an audible voice. God has a series of themes that occur over time. It is generally lately that I'm supposed to talk to people about God. I'm 50. I have 3 boys. I've been raising. My husband traveled for years and for work, so I've stayed at home with the kids. I'm nobody. But I think God uses the nobodies. So, here goes. I want to give you my testimony. My dog's in the room, one of them. There are 2, so. I grew up not even in town, in the country. I was about 1.5 miles out of a small town in the San Joaquin Valley of California. Dirt poor. I lived in a mobile home on 20 acres that somebody else farmed. We got like very little money from that. My dad was in the Navy for 30 years. And that was, a long time ago. So, you don't make a whole lot of money in the military. My mom was an artist. She stayed at home and painted. I was the youngest of 3. My mom was pretty much just depressed all the time. My dad was hardly ever home, and when he was a very strict disciplinarian. So there wasn't a lot of affection in our family. I was starving for affection and attention as a very small child, and my parents were emotionally unavailable. My brother and sister, who were 6 years older than I and 4 years older than I. My sister is the oldest, and then my brother was 4 years older than I. They were, living their own lives, trying to survive. Basically, life was just survival. I was kicked in the head by a horse. We had horses and goats and chickens, and I was kicked in the head. We were feeding the animals, and I was 4. My brother and sister were there, and they were, saying, Audrey, get up, you're fine, until they saw the blood, and I ended up, being rushed to the hospital and flown to another city that had a larger facility that was available for this sort of care. And I had to have all of my hair shaved off. I ended up being in the hospital for, a month or 2. And my parents, when I left the hospital, I had like 250 some odd stitches in my head. In order to patch my head back together, they had to remove parts of my skull that had been shattered and put them back in place and then stitch everything back up. So here I am, 4 years old, shaved head with, a large scar that is just barely healing. And for therapy, my parents decided to put me in school, right? They think that the process of learning would be increased if they put me in school. We didn't have any money for therapy. We lived in the country in a small town in the middle of nowhere. So, there wasn't really therapy available that I'm aware of, unless the military offered that. But my parents weren't the type to take you to the hospital for any little thing. It was very rare. I'm a little girl in a dress. I'm wearing an army helmet. Literally a green Vietnam army helmet, okay? With a padding inside to protect my head. So a little girl in a pink dress with a green Vietnam Army helmet in about 1974. I am going to this small school where there's about 24 kids in our class, and largely Hispanic community, because they were immigrants working in the agricultural area that I lived, and I was a minority. In fact, the only 4 white kids in the class were, the others other than myself were all Portuguese. So the farm owners were Portuguese. The farm workers were Mexican. And I'm a little white girl whose dad's in the Navy, and I'm not living on base, so there's no one there like me. Nobody gets me, right? Plus, I have an Army helmet, and I'm bald. They've shaved my hair. I'm 4, so I'm younger than everyone else. Much disadvantage in this situation. So, needless to say, I was totally abused by my, peers. The kids would call me names like, Frankenstein. My hair started to grow in. Eventually things changed. There's only 24 kids in my class, but I was definitely the peon. So once my hair grows in, my 2 front teeth fall out. As my teeth start to grow in, this is one embarrassment to the next, right? My teeth grow in like buck teeth, like huge. And it was the worst, of course. More ammo for the humiliation. And then they call me Bucktooth Beaver, Can Opener, Bugs Bunny, that kind of thing. So the years go on, and about 4th grade, if I was 4 when I started kindergarten, 4th grade I'm about 8. Then this is about when I started going to church. My sister had met someone from high school that she was friends with, whose parents had a church in the small town that we lived just outside of. Their parents had a Pentecostal church. My sister and I start going to this church. I am starved for someone to love me. And of course, I hear the gospel of Jesus, and it's amazing. I mean, the sacrifice that he made for us. Amazing, right? I completely feel the Holy Spirit. I am experiencing something that's real to me, physically real. So I jump in with both feet. I totally believe it. It's real. It's real. Jesus is real, right? And God really loves me. And because of, the fact that I was pretty much neglected by my family, and they had their own problems. It was a dysfunctional family. And, rejected and abused by my peers. Jesus was the only hope I had, right? So I continue with the ridicule at school, and 4th grade was a turning point, though, because of Jesus. But the ridicule did not end. It got worse, because at this point, my parents decide, I've been begging, help me, my teeth are messed up. Can we fix this? But I still had a lot of baby teeth, and so they decide to take me in, and they remove 9 teeth from my mouth, and I think a few of them were permanent. They surgically remove these teeth to make way with time to heal. They put braces on me, but they make me wear, the mouth guard, right? The big wire that goes around your neck. Not only that, but also the headpiece that goes on top, right? The straps that are attached on either side. Yes. So, 4th grade, it gets worse. Nothing changes. I'm still the can opener, right? Meanwhile, my parents, my father is going out to sea for 6-month cruises. My mom is a stay-at-home mom who, she's caught up in her art, but she's really very unhappy being secluded from the world. And there was a reason my father had us out there in the country. He was a cowboy. He was a bull rider. He did enjoy that life, but it was worse than that. And I'll talk about that later. We are getting ready to graduate 8th grade, and it's the same pretty much 24 or 25 kids that were in our kindergarten class, we graduate 8th grade with. I mean, it's the same school, nothing's changed. We didn't have a middle school, it was too small. So I graduate 8th grade and move on to high school, and everything changes. By 8th grade, of course, my teeth are a little bit better. I don't have to wear the headgear, but I still have the braces. I start high school with braces. And, I've been going to church for a little while there. I had gone to church, but my sister ends up being 6 years older than I was at 12, so that would have been like 6th grade or so. My sister gets married and she moves away. She was in Hawaii at this time because she marries a Navy man as well. So fast forward, I'm in high school and I start getting attention from boys, and of course, this is the first time I've ever experienced that, sort of. I mean, little things at school, but it wasn't ever like this because, I was the reject. So boys start paying me attention in school, and I didn't know how to say no because it was attention. It was positive attention. It's the first time I'd really had seriously positive attention. Never had any encouragement. Through school, I was worse than mediocre as a student because I was so dysfunctional socially that I couldn't keep up with the homework. My attention span was minute. I probably have ADD. In fact, I guaranteed you I have ADD. I don't want to claim that in Jesus' name, but there are issues with the way my brain works. I am definitely a creative, but that's no excuse. From that point in high school, I ended up getting involved with relationships with boys and going way too fast, way too far, way too fast, and all the repercussions that come with that. So more rejection from boys because they only want one thing at that age anyway. And my mom and I decide to go on a trip, but while we're on this trip, she finds out she has cancer my sophomore year. My mom and I are rushing home because she's just seen a doctor in Idaho that says she has a lump, and she needs to get home to see her doctor to verify if it's cancer or not. And I didn't understand the immense trauma that was coming upon our family. I had no idea what was about to happen. So I'm this, excited young teenager who's happy to get the attention of boys. And so my mom and I are in a train station, and here come all these guys my age, young high school boys who are baseball players. And it turns out there was a tournament in probably Portland, Oregon, I think is where they got on the train. And, we're looking at all the guys, we're pointing them out. My mom's going, hey, what about this guy? And I'm like, no, I like that one right there. And she's like, okay. And we get on the train. Didn't see the boys until they start walking by, and I'm very excited. Anyway, one of the boys asks me back to sit with him. It was the one that my mom said was cute, right? I'm like, okay, I'll go sit with you. My mom gave me permission. We go. Within just a few minutes, the guy, quick to put his hand on my knee, and I am like, wow, shouldn't we talk? I mean, get to know me at least. It was crazy. So I was very uncomfortable. Luckily, when I asked him what time it was, he had to pick up his hand to look at his watch. And I said, okay, this is my exit. I said, thanks, nice to meet you. I'm out of here. Go back to see my mom, sit down. A few hours go by, and we see this young man come by, the one that I had picked out. And he, instead of asking me if I can go sit with him, he asks if he can sit with us. So he sits down, we start visiting, get to know each other. Totally no moves. He was a great guy, and we just sat and talked like literally all night long. And next morning we get off, we go our separate ways, we keep in touch over time. So he and I start dating. He's in Los Angeles, which was about 3 hours from where I had lived at the time. And he would come to visit me, right? Anyway, we start this relationship. So meanwhile, I have had an encounter with Jesus when I was young. And I believed that God was real, but I was not very educated. I had a very short period of time to really, 3 or 4 years, but it was Sundays and not really a whole lot. My parents were not Christians, and this guy that I was dating at the time was, he was Catholic, which, he had a general understanding, but not a personal relationship with God. In fact, I was teaching him about things. So we dated for, 9 months. Meanwhile, my mom is getting sicker. Turns out the cancer is real, it's bad, and she starts chemo and radiation, loses her hair. By this time, my brother and my sister have both moved out. I'm home alone with my mom and my dad, and my mom is going through this. I'm in high school, so I'm doing normal everyday high school things that any teenager would do. Meanwhile, my mom is getting sicker and sicker. So I start to self-medicate. I meet some friends who have access to marijuana and, drinking alcohol. And so I am just trying to stay sane, basically. I end up sort of neglecting my mom through the process because I couldn't face what she was going through. But at the same time, internally, I am really struggling. So of course I turn to God. I end up reading the Bible. Start at Genesis, and it wasn't long until I'm reading this going, I don't understand, there are some things in there, Genesis chapter 6 and some other things. Then I'm going, well, what does that mean, And it didn't make any sense. I had no one to turn to emotionally for the trauma I was going through. Neither did I have anyone to turn to spiritually for information regarding things I had been learning in the Bible. But I still had faith. Sometimes, even though things don't make sense, but it's real, your relationship with God, you have to have faith, even in the midst of your not understanding it. And I was able to do that because I had this encounter, and God was so real that I could continue on in faith, even though it didn't make sense. And I'll talk some more about these items in the Bible that didn't make sense to me then, because, fast forward many years, God has revealed to me some things that might help you. I ended up staying stoned for like 2 years because I couldn't face my mother dying. I'm dating different guys. The guy that I had met and had dated in Los Angeles, that relationship didn't last because it was a long distance relationship. So, but we stayed friends. By this time, my senior year, I'm in a play, but yet my attention deficit, as well as, the distraught that my mother is going through, cancer, and also she ends up dying in like April. So it was my junior year that I was in the high school play. That's what it was. And my mom was sick. I mean, it wasn't going to get any better. My parents had traveled to Oakland Hospital, Oak Knoll Hospital, a Navy hospital where my mom could get treatment. So I was left alone a lot. I mean, for days. Because, there were things that needed to be taken care of. I mean, I understand it was the circumstances, but it wasn't healthy for me. So fast forward, my mom is sicker and sicker and passes away my senior year. By this time, I'm completely just in the middle of this 2-year period of being stoned as much as possible. I can't cope. I had, a few friends that were good friends, but it was only like two, the guy I was dating and his sister and of course, their family, but it was minimal contact with any adults or other siblings. It was just basically the maybe a couple of other friends, but it wasn't like, a whole lot of support system. It was a tight-knit group of maybe 5 of us, so maybe 6 at the most. And we just escaped reality as much as we could. We'd do crazy things, like there was not a whole lot of parental supervision. I had a Volkswagen thing, and we would drive the Volkswagen thing on the ditch bank, right? So there's a pathway in San Joaquin Valley in Central California. The irrigation system works in such a way that you have these irrigation ditches, right? And they're deep enough to swim in and wide enough that you can put a car on the roadway that goes right next to the ditch, and behind the car we'd have a tow rope that you would use for water skiing, and the person in the ditch would have a surfboard. So we would go ditch surfing is what we would do. And I'd be the one driving. So I'm driving, pulling these people. I've never surfed. I've never ditch surfed either. But the guys, they'd be the surfers and we'd be partying, right? So we're ditch surfing, and do not do this at home. Anyway, this was crazy stuff. Somebody could have gotten really hurt, especially since we were stoned most of the time. I look back on it and you have to laugh because we were crazy, and God totally saw us through this. I mean, when I was high and I would get behind the wheel of the car, I would pray that God would just watch over and protect us, even though I was doing something I knew was wrong. And so, I still had faith, and God had patience with me. He meets you where you are, even when you're in sin. So, don't discount yourself because you're having a hard time freeing yourself from sin in your life, because God will meet you where you are and He will pull you out of it. It is by His strength that we overcome, because you can't do it by yourself. And the devil wants you to think that you can't come to God until you're clean, but it doesn't work like that. It is only through God that you can get clean. So anyway, back to the story. So my mom passes away. I have to finish high school. I'm only a few months away from graduation. So it's all I can do to just attend class. There was no one. My father was the silent generation. So there wasn't a lot of communication. I just kind of went on with my life and never processed the loss. So my friend from Los Angeles, the guy I had dated previously, stayed in touch. Fast forward a year after my mom passes away, and I'm still getting high, and I have no church to go to. I have the same friends I had been hanging out with, but our routine is basically just to be not sober. And my father is, like I said, my father is emotionally unavailable, and I had no support. So, but internally I knew that I wanted more for my life. There was no encouragement to go to college. I wasn't a very good student. I had no real purpose. I was trying to, work as a waitress or something, and it was not the best situation. I was not good at it. So I ended up calling up my friend who I knew from Los Angeles, the guy I had dated previously, and by this time he's dating somebody else, right? But one of his friends lives is going to UCLA. And he invites me to come anyway, even though, we'll go to UCLA, which is outside of Downey, the area that he was living at the time, and his girlfriend would never find out that I had come to town. But I wasn't looking for anything. I just needed a friend. I needed to get out of the San Joaquin Valley. I needed to get away from being high. I needed to have some new purpose in my life. I just needed out, right? So I end up going to Los Angeles, and when I get there, we're hanging out with his friend who goes to UCLA, right? It was a favor the guy did for us, but he's got these two girls there who are, the typical, probably, I don't know, city chick, totally I'm back in elementary school, the way that they are treating me, right? I was some country girl, farm chick, it was awful. So this is not helping me. I was trying to get away, and I get thrown back into the fire, basically. So I realize, hey, my brother lives in LA. I haven't seen him since my mom's funeral, which was a year prior. And before that, I hadn't seen him for a couple of years before that. So I'm like, well, I wonder where Chris is. Let's call him. Oli totally understands. He's really cool about it. So I call my brother. And he goes, hey, where are you at? I said, well, I'm in LA. And he goes, no way. Where in LA? And I said, I'm in Westwood. He says, what? No way. So what street are you on? And I go, well, I find out the address of the location that we're at, and he says, okay, I want you to go to the front of the building. I want you to, when you get to the sidewalk, turn left. When you get to the corner, turn left again and walk 2 blocks, okay? He says, go now. I hang up the phone. I walk out the front door. I turn left. I walk to the corner. I turn left again. I walk 2 blocks, and there is my brother, catty corner across Wilshire Boulevard, okay? I haven't spoken to my brother in over a year. I had no idea where he lived, and we just so happened to be in the same 4-block radius as he is. Yeah, what? So he says, hey, what are you doing? Oh my gosh, what brought you to LA? And I'm just like, I just need to get away. And he's like, okay, I totally understand. So I've got this wedding I got to go to. You want to come with me tomorrow? I said, why not? I've got nothing else to do, so I'll just go. So Saturday morning, we get up. I stay with him. He takes me to the wedding. I meet all his friends. He's got all these friends, beautiful, young, attractive, California, LA people who are all Christians. And the wedding is being put, it's a couple of friends of his that met at church, and they're getting married, and they are, being married by the pastor of the church that they all go to. And so I go to the reception, and some guy shows interest in me, and I dance with him, and I have a great time, and we, go out to eat afterwards, and it is the kind of camaraderie I've never had before. And it was good, clean fun. Nobody's high. And it was different, It was definitely unique. So my brother, says, hey, so tomorrow morning is church. Do you want to come? And I'm like, so the guy that I danced with, will he be there? And he says, yeah, probably. And I said, okay, I'll go. Turns out it is Easter or something like that. I think it was Easter weekend. And the whole service was just worship. It was beautiful. And the church, it was like in a school. It wasn't a big deal. It was, an auditorium of a school. But the people were phenomenal, young. It wasn't anything like the Pentecostal church I had gone to. I'd never been to a church like this before. The music was great. It wasn't like the crazy Christian music you hear on the radio. It was like modern and contemporary and beautiful and good. And the worship was fabulous. It was really cool. I had never experienced anything like this. And I was experiencing that same intimacy with God that I had had when I was 8 or 9, the first time I had ever, given my heart to Jesus. And it was real again. So I'm crying, of course, the whole time. And, my brother's like, so did you say the prayer? Come on. And he drags me down to the front and they pray over me. And all of his friends are like, oh, did you say it? And, the whole give your heart to the Lord thing. I had already done it years ago, but here it was, I'm doing it again. I've done it a million times, but it's always worth it. So anyway, I go back home and my dad, it's the same situation. He's emotionally unavailable. I'm hanging out with the same friends and they all want to get high and I'm going nowhere. I have no purpose. So I end up telling my dad that I want to move to LA. He gives me $800. I load all my stuffed animals and tapes, cassette tapes and clothes into my Volkswagen thing, right? And I get on the road. My brother has got a friend of his from church who's going to let me live in her apartment. We're going to share the apartment and I'm going to find a job and pay rent and get a life, right? By this time, I'm 18. I end up getting on the road, in the afternoon. I'm going to go stay with my friend who lived in Bakersfield, so it was only about an hour or so away from where I, lived at the time. I was going to stop off in Bakersfield, see her that night, and then drive into LA the next day. I get on the road, and my car overheats, and I have to pull over. And so I call my dad. I walk to a gas station. There were no cell phones at that time. I call my dad. He, has to take time to get to where I'm at. I'm, a good 40 minutes from where he was. So he gets on the road and comes to see me, and he puts oil in the car, and we start back on the road. And he says, I'm going to follow you to get to Bakersfield. It's only another 20, 30 minutes from here. So it's becoming dusk, and it's getting darker as we're cruising along, and I see him behind me, but then pretty soon I don't see him. He's not behind me anymore. So I pull off to the side of the freeway. It's this highway, and he's not there. So I look, and he's way back, and he's pulled over to the side of the road. He's got his hazards on. So I decide to back up on the side of the freeway, the dirt path on the side of the freeway. So, of course, bad idea. I'm a kid. This is not this was not the last time I made this kind of crazy choice, but backing up on the side of the freeway, I hit one of those irrigation canals that go under the road where the concrete is elevated on one side and my car tips over on the side. And my dad is running. He's wearing his cowboy hat and boots, running in jeans down the side of the freeway to get to me. And I am suspended in my car by my seat belt. And I am laying sideways, freaking out, right? People stop on the highway and it takes about 4 people to push the car back over. And my dad is like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm fine." And there was nothing wrong with the car. And it turns out he had a flat tire. So anyway, we just decide to, get his tire fixed. He puts his spare on, and it's one of those little donut things, and we head to Bakersfield, where I stayed. We both stayed the night at my friend's house, and they were totally okay with him staying too. And we, my dad goes out the next morning to find a tire, and I end up getting on the road. Right, he says, "Just go, you'll be fine. If you have any trouble, let me know." So he's going out to buy a tire to replace the one that had been, messed up on the road. I get to just the foot of the Grapevine, which is a windy up and down, mountainous road. It's the highway that goes from the San Joaquin Valley into the Los Angeles area. And it is high elevation at points and very windy and just quite a stretch of road in a Volkswagen thing, okay? So at this point, my car overheats again. I get to a gas station, I start pouring oil into it, and I look underneath and it's pouring out the bottom. So of course I have to call my dad and wait for him. He comes, and it turns out you just gotta tighten these bolts on the bottom and it retains oil and no longer overheats. Yet this does not fix the fact that my little Volkswagen can barely make it over the mountains to get to the LA area. So all this to say that this 3-hour trip from the San Joaquin Valley town that I lived in to Los Angeles turned into 2 days of craziness, because I believe the devil didn't want me to change my life. I believe that at that point it was discouragement trying to prevent me from moving forward. I was going to live in Los Angeles and go to a fabulous church and meet Christians who were fabulous people and hopefully, make something of my life, where the devil wants you to stay in your mess, the life that he wants for you, where you are not making progress or doing anything that furthers the kingdom of God. So this is my testimony. I did go to Los Angeles. I spent 2.5 years there. It was a great experience. I learned a lot. I became a better person. I became a stronger Christian. I became more hopeful. Less trauma. I'm still healing, all these years later, from my childhood, but life is a process. So what I'm doing is telling you this because I feel like, you need to know that no matter where you come from, God has a purpose for you. He has created you to have desires and excitement about things. He created those desires in your heart, so he wants to give you the desires of your heart. He put them there for a reason. So look to pursue the things, the dreams that you have, the hopes that you have through Christ. God will make a way where there seems to be no way. So I want to challenge you. This is, just me sitting here talking in front of a camera, and you can do the same. I want you to tell your story about where God has impacted you. I want you to spread the word, and I want everyone that watches that video to then do the same. If we all start making videos of the testimony that God has given us in our life, the things that he's done through us, and the way that we can share hope in this world that is falling apart, because there can't be much more time left. Realize this. Things are getting crazy. And the Bible talks about it all. There are things in the Bible that explain exactly what's going on. So there's not much more time left. Whether time comes to an end or our lives come to an end, time is short either way. So I challenge you, tell your testimony. Tell others about how God has impacted you. We need to spread the word and show people that God is real. All right. Thanks for listening. Bye.